What's up guys, Zenara here, and today I'm going to be doing a video about some important staples for Bermuda Triangle for the format standard. I will be doing a premium one soon. Sorry for the lack of uploads. There hasn't been really much that changed in the market watches, so I haven't been uploading any videos, as well as some other things that's been going on in my life, but let's just get it started. So I'm gonna do it starting in the order of grades. So we're gonna start with grade 0s and then go up to grade 4. So this is just for in general. This isn't specific decks. This is just kind of generic support that you want to pick up for your decks. So these can be played in almost any of the Bermuda Triangle variants. So the first card I want to talk about is, of course, the Draw Perfect Guard, Glittery Baby Lene. So I listed the pros and cons of why you might want to play this specific staple in the deck and why it's good and why it has some downsides, but mostly all of these are pretty good. So the pros of Lene is that she opens up grade 1 space, so allows you to play more grade 1s, and she increases hand size. It's a draw trigger, so of course you want to have a healthy hand size. Some of the cons is that if you're getting attacked multiple times, so say like it gets to cell decks, it costs way more cards in your hand to Perfect Guard and attack, and of course her being a draw, it will lower the amount of critical triggers that you have in your deck. So when the Sentinel crits are revealed in the next set, I'm in the upcoming set for Bermuda, it's up to you if you want to play the Sentinel crits or the draw PGs. It's up to you. So now we're going to talk about the grade 1s. The next grade 1 we're going to be talking about is Rainy Tear Staza. So this was the very first, this was in the first set of Bermuda Triangle. It was pretty staple for Melody, and it's still pretty staple for decks like Riviere. Sometimes you could play in other Melody variants. So the pros of Staza is that she's a +1 to hand, a hard +1, not a soft +1. That was my bad on that. She clears board, so after you attack, after you boost a Vanguard with her, you can retire her, and that clears the field. So against decks that like to control your board, so like Mega Colony likes to throw the Cradle markers, and some other retired base decks might want to bind your units or retire it. Your board's clear, so you don't have to worry about that. And she returns grade 3s to your deck. So if there's a specific grade 3 you want in your deck, so for Melody, you can put back your grade 3s that you got retired or you called over, and any other combo piece that you might need that's a grade 3 in the future. The only two cons that she has is that it has to boost the Vanguard to activate. It can be sort of restrictive if you have 2 of her in your hand, and you kind of just have to have the other in your hand, or just a generic AK booster. It's only an AK, so if it got a little, if it had more power, it would have been a lot more powerful, but so far you get more pluses than you do of a con. So the next grade 1 I want to talk about is Special Message Aura. This was a trial deck card, but also has been reprinted in the Festival collection, as well as another reprint within, I believe, not Crystal Melody, Twinkle Melody as well. So if you didn't have this card, you definitely have this card if you want the all the good stuff that she's going to provide. So her pros is that she filters your hand. You can activate it on pretty much turn 1 when you start. So if there's a card you don't want in your hand, you put it in a drop zone. She can set up future cards for plussing. So if you have a grade 3 that you don't want, put it in the drop zone. You have stays in your deck, she can plus you later. It can be used on Vanguard, so some cards might be on rear guard only, you use on Vanguard and Rearguard, and it's very accessible, so it's very easy to obtain a card for a very cheap price. It isn't hard to access it or be able to obtain this card. There's a couple cons. The first con is that it's only a hard once a turn. Now, if you was able to spam this over and over, it would have been really too strong. But that's why it has a hard once a turn, so you can't call another one of it, even if it's bounced. You can only use this ability once. Another con is this an AK, same as Staza. It's only a vanilla AK after you use this ability. And the last one is that it has a mandatory on place. So once you play it on your Vanguard Rearguard circle, you have to do the fets. You cannot say that I'm not doing the fets. You have to. It's mandatory. But considering the cons, there's a lot of pros, especially for decks that want to see specific pieces. So it's always good to have this card in your deck, or just an option when building future decks. Now, the last grade one, I wouldn't say it's a guarantee staple, but some decks might run it. It's the grade 1 PG innate personal inness. So the pro is that it's a perfect guard. So it acts as a sentinel. So when you place on guard circle, you can discard a card, and that unit cannot be hit to the end of battle. They selected. It allows you to run more critical triggers. So for decks that like to be more aggro in the beginning or have a lot of critical triggers, you can play more crits. Now, this might be invalid once we get crit sentinels, but it's still a very good option if you don't want to play the crit sentinels. You can always play the grade 1 perfect guard, or just another budget option. It has a Vanguard skill that hand filters, so just like Aurora, you draw a card and you can discard a card from your hand. So it allows you to start rolling with to try to filter for cards that you want in your hand. And for Staza as well, if you want a grade 3 in the drop, you can discard a grade 3. Use Staza skill and get a hard +1. And it's very generic and accessible. It doesn't have any restrictions. It doesn't need any specific costs other than just being played in the deck, really. And it's very cheap. So if you ever on the budget side, you need some perfect guards, and you can't get Lene, you can't get the critical sentinels. There's always the trial deck ones that are generic like this, but this one is better since it has that generic Vanguard skill that filters your hand. So the only two cons, which is pretty big, but it's not too hard on your deck building. It fills up grade 1 slots. A lot of decks don't want to be running grade 1 perfect guards. You just have a lot more better grade 1s that you want to put in that spot of the grade 1 sentinel. And then next, it's a 7k unit. So if you ride with this on your Vanguard circle, your opponent can easily pressure you and put you at high damage since this is 7k. Even a generic 8k can swing into you and still pressure you. It forces you to call cards from hand. But like I said, the cons are a little bit more potent than the pros. However, there can be strategies in the future, no matter what cards that are going to come and be revealed, that we might actually want to use the grade 1 sentinel. So next, we're going to go to the grade 2s. We have three grade 2s. First off, of course, we're going to talk about Coco, Loveheart, Loveheart. So she has a bunch of pros and hardly any cons. So her pros is that she's a hard +1 to soul or field. So when you call her, you look at the top card. You can place in soul or call into field. There's no grade restriction of what you could call. You just +1 to soul. Very easy. It can be called as a grade 1, so it allows you to start plussing very, very early. If you already have a grade 2 in your hand, if you have a leisure lot, call it +1 to soul, +1 to field, or start aggroing, which is really, really good. It can recoup from retire or bind. So if your opponent starts binding a bunch of stuff on your field, you can start calling her, try to recoup some of the loss that you gain. Like I said before, she allows early aggro strategy, so if you want to be very aggressive, call leaves a lot. Even if it's a trigger, you can still call it, still pressure your opponent early. It's really, really good. It can be activated on a Vanguard circle, so if you end up riding her, you could use her skill too. She's very accessible. Like I said, she was in the TD, and I believe she's been reprinted twice, so it's just very accessible. You can even get the cheapest version of Lisa Line. It's still very good, and it's free. It doesn't cost anything. The only two cons, if you can even call it cons, is that it's a hard one to turn. It has to be a hard one to turn. It will be ridiculous in premium, and even standard if we get multiple bounces in the turn. If we do get that in Twinkle Melody, and it's just a 10k swing. It's just 10k body, but even so, it still has so many pros that it's still, I'll regard as a staple for the future. The next grade 2 is from Clover Pastoral Caro. So she has a couple pros. One of the pros is that she can search a copy of your grade 3 Vanguard. So of course, best example is with Riviere. Search your Vanguard and use her skill next turn. Cool. You did what the deck wanted to do, and she just allows you to filter out your deck of grade 3s. You don't want to drive check grade 3s unless there's a skill or something with them, but it just she thins your deck out of dead cards that you don't want to drive check, which is really good. She has Melody, so she can work with other Melody skills. So I would say Melody by itself is sort of generic. I'm not putting all of them in here, but Caro's probably like the best generic one since it can fit in multiple decks. And like the next point says, she's very generic, and so she's standalone. You can pretty much put her in any other feature deck, maybe like, I don't know what the decks are going to do, but maybe one of the VRs might want to copy the Vanguard, or you want to rewrite next turn. Use Caro, get the Vanguard, thin your deck out of one card, and you're good. You got your next rewrite. Now the cons of this card is that it's only on rearguard circle only, so if you write it, you're not going to get the skill. You just missed out a chance of using it, which might happen sometimes. It's a hard one to turn just to prevent you looping. It's 10k by itself, like most of the Melody grade 2s are, unless you play a combination with other cards. But if you don't have any Melody units like Sonata or whatever future support they're going to get, it's just going to be 10k vanilla by itself after using a skill. And the Soul Blast 2 can be heavy in some decks. So I know Pacifica can use Caro. It's sort of heavy in that deck since you use Soul Blast for its main cost. Whatever future decks are going to be made in Twinkle Melody, Soul Blast 2 might be a bit heavy, but depending how you build your deck, you should be pretty fine with adding Caro to the deck. Next, the last grade 3 I want to talk about is Mastery Clover Meme. So Meme has a couple of pretty good pros, which she was mainly played in premium, sometimes in standard, but mainly premium when she was first released. So I still want to talk about standard because it still has a has a lot of good pros to it. So it's a possible hard +1 to hand. So with her effect, you on place on rearguard only, you combos 1, you can draw 2 cards, you return a card from your hand to your deck, and then you shuffle it. If you don't have a rearguard with the same name as your Vanguard on your RC, return up to 3 cards instead of 1. So you can filter your hand with this, you can compress your deck with this. So if you have like a bunch of triggers in your hand, call Meme, draw 2 cards, put all your triggers back. Like if you have 3 triggers, put them back, shuffle. Now you're compressing your deck you're filtering cards that you don't want from your hand into the deck. I remember when this card was revealed, I was not happy because I have to return 3 cards back until, you know, sometimes you just have a bunch of triggers, you can't do anything. Caller, draw 2. If you got good cards, just put back all your triggers. You're losing some defense, but also you're filtering your deck and compressing it with triggers to increase your chance of actually getting more. She's very generic. She doesn't need any other card other than like cards that want the same rear guard on there. But if you use it for deck compression, you don't need her for anything else, which is really, really good. And she, if not, once a turn. So if we get a card that returns her to hand, we can simply just bounce it and use her effect again, which is really, really good. So her cons is that in order to get the +1 to hand, you have to have a card with the same name as the Vanguard as the rear guard. The rear guard have to have the same name as the Vanguard. My bad. Some decks, most decks, that's like hardly possible unless you just get lucky. This was mainly played in Melody because you might have a Sonata. Just throw a Mime out, you can get a +1. Pacifica can use this card since you want to call Pacifica. Coral might, but you want to re-ride Coral, or it might already be in the soul, so it might not even be in your hand. Whatever future decks might want to use her just to filter and compress your hand. Again, with most of the grade 2s, is this 10k alone? It doesn't do anything. It doesn't gain any extra powers. It's more of a utility card, and it's rear guard only. If you ride it, yeah, you lost out of the skill. So, I would talk about the grade 3s, but pretty much all of the grade 3s are like not really something you want to splash into other decks, since they don't have any like generic skills or anything that can help other decks. Who knows, there might be grade 3s in Twinkle Melody that might do that, or just be good all around in multiple different decks. But I do want to talk about one grade 4 that is able to do that, and that's Crystal Popstar Eve. She has a bunch of pros, but the cons just hurt this card so much. So I'll explain the pros right quickly. She's 14k base, better numbers for defense, better numbers for attacking. She doubles the trigger power on both turns, so if you get a trigger on your turn, she doubles it, so instead of 10k it's 20k. And if you get a draw trigger when your opponent attacks you, she could be 34 instead of 24. So it increases your defense and it increases your power at the same time. She could double your critical triggers, so this is where the critical based strategy decks might come into play. You might want just nothing but crits. Cheston with Eve, not her 2 crits. And then you can look at the top card of your deck during your main phase for no cost. She's completely free, all the effects are free. The only cost is looking at the top card of your deck, which is already free. She can set up drive checks, meaning you could be sort of a mini OTT by looking at the top card. Oh, it's a crit, I'll just leave it at the top. If it's a card I want to draw, I remember I was testing with her. I will leave a card that I want in my hand, call a card to draw that card. So you could be a sort of mini, like I said, OTT. It's not hard once a turn. It's not even once a turn. You can just keep look at the top card, look at the top card, just to double check, plan out your turn. She hard pluses to the board if it's empty, so you can +5 from just calling the top, looking top and then calling it. She's very generic. You can play her literally in any deck, and it won't hurt the deck at all, other than you just staying on a grade 4. And she's a force marker, so you get force when you ride her, which is of course always good. I think all of Bermuda's grade 4s has been force so far. And The only two cons which hurt the card a lot is a turn 4 card. It in the meta where there are decks that want to pressure you as hard as possible once they reach grade 3, you're not, at the current moment, you're not going to survive. Bermuda is actually very far behind in terms of power, so they're not even going to have enough card power or defense power to like survive until their turn 4, unless they get cards that can skip to grade 4. But who knows what the outcome in the future. She's only slowed down because it's a turn 4 card. You have to get to grade 4. And lastly, it can conflict with grade ratios. I know I had this issue a lot, like how many Eves are going to run, how many of other cards are going to run, and it could just create issues within the deck. Also, I forgot to add, because it's a grade 4, you might have consistency of trying to draw into it. I know there are some E-based decks, and the only way to make it consistent is to run 4. And yeah, you could run 3, but it's not as better as just running 4. As well as this card can be expensive since it's very generic and it's a pretty powerful effect. So hopefully this didn't take too long. I try to make it the fastest I can while explaining the effect. There was a couple cards for standard that I wanted to talk about that are pretty staple or ideal staple cards that you should get. I will be doing premium soon. Whenever, I'll probably do it after either Vanquisher or Gabriel's released. But if you guys like the video, leave a like and tell me what other videos should I make for the upcoming Bermuda set. I have a couple of ideas. I'm just trying to figure out a schedule how to get them all uploaded. So if you guys enjoyed,